and today we're here to find out, can you beat Grim Dawn with only pets? This run was mostly done to refamiliarize myself with Grim Dawn because it'd been a while since I played it and I wanted to come up with some more runs for it in the near future. And I expect that this won't be too difficult once we get pets, but getting levels without them will be interesting to say the least. But first, the rules. We can't use damage-dealing skills or basic attacks on enemies. We can destroy inanimate objects. They don't grant XP, so to me they aren't enemies even if they happen to have a health bar. To be clear, misclicks will happen. I'll be looting or smashing a door down and accidentally target an enemy. I tried mouse and keyboard and controller and both were prone to it. The game tends to assume we want to hit enemies, oddly enough. Damage from enemy infighting and allies is allowed. All equipment is fair game, including weapons, although they'll only help if they boost our pets in some way, so we'll be unarmed until we find a weapon that does. Passive skills are also fine. No sharing items between characters or multiplayer. No glitches or gameplay mods. Official DLC is allowed. Before we start the run, I'd like to take a moment to thank our channel members. In the You Broke the Tip Jar tier, we have Forgotten God and Ginger Knight. In the bigger tip jar tier, we have K Plays Music and Games and Blackwood. And in the tip jar tier, we have Ace of Kestrels, Ragnarok, Tox, Bwezu, Jack1165, Narugility, and Zachary Smith. Thank you all for your support. We're cut down from the gallows after the ethereal possessing us flees our body and told to see the captain. The captain is, understandably, wary of the recently possessed person and wants us to slay the reanimator on Burial Hill that's sending waves of undead to Devil's Crossing before he opens the camp up to us. This means we can't complete several quests until the reanimator is gone, even ones that don't require combat, like saving the guy in a ruined house surrounded by giant bugs by teleporting him to Devil's Crossing with our Rift Gate. A more reasonable person might say, play normally until we get a pet and then start the run. But there is a way to get XP that doesn't require us to complete quests or slay enemies. Notes. We get XP for reading notes scattered around the world. Right now, we can only access Act 1, although if we get enough scrap and iron bits, we could repair the bridge to the Act 2 region. However, we'll only resort to that if we absolutely have to. It'll be hard enough to get through the later areas of Act 1 at level 1 with no way to damage enemies, never mind Act 2. Unfortunately, the wiki doesn't say how much XP each note gives us, so I have no idea how many we'll need to reach. We don't want to read notes as we find them because dying costs precious XP, and we'll be dying a lot while obtaining these notes, so ideally we want to get as many as we can and then read them all at once. The notes at the Lower Crossing in Whitemire, Francis's note, the Harbor Master's log, Lower Crossing, the first two entries of Inquisitor Creed's journal, and Dirt-covered note aren't difficult to reach. We're overwhelmed occasionally, but can take a few hits from these enemies. The first page of Hargate's journal gives us trouble. The Slith outside the lab are about level 6, so they can plaster us quickly. It was around this point I realized we'd have to use the mouse to pick up the notes if there are enemies around. On controller, the targeting is fixated on nearby enemies and doesn't let us loot. But it's easier to move around on controller without getting stuck on the terrain or on enemies, at least for me, so we'll switch between the two as needed. We can't get the rest of Hargate's journal because we can't enter the lab until we start the Origin of the Slith quest, which we can't do until after we take down the Reanimator at the earliest. Any notes related to the hidden path can't be picked up as we can't reach those areas until we take out the Guardian of Krieg. In fact, any notes dropped by enemies are unobtainable for now, eliminating Milton Hart's note and the missive to Warden Krieg as well. We also can't access areas that require dynamite to clear a blockage, which eliminates the muddy note in the East Marsh. We can't get to the crudely scrawled note either, even though we can see it from where we woke up, as they won't let us into the prison. Dairene's directions are related to another side quest we can't start. However, that leaves Alistair's diary, the Burwitch reconnaissance report, Gethrin's notes, the Harbor Master's log in Burwitch, the 4 remaining entries of Inquisitor Creed's journal, the missive to the Whitemire Bloodbound, Warden Krieg's journal, and Zanbrand's notes. There are also random notes that can pop up whenever a bookcase in the correct area is destroyed, but I'm not worrying about those. If we happen to find them, great. If not, we'll make do. Unfortunately, a lot of those remaining notes are near Burwitch, which is far further than we're supposed to go at level 1. The missive to the Whitemire Bloodbound would have been closest, but I forgot about that one and went for the next closest, the Burwitch Reconnaissance Report, which required us to get through the White Marsh, Sodden Hollow, and Foggy Bank areas, which had tons of slith. However, they were fairly open areas, so we could at least move freely. Foreshadowing here. We can't get through the flooded passage though because rocks block the way out until we take out the boss at the end of the cave. However, we can bypass it entirely by repairing the bridge leading from the Foggy Bank to the Berwick outskirts, although we need 3 scrap and 5,000 iron bits to do so. I thought the scrap would be an issue, but all we had to do was destroy crates and junk piles. The iron bits took longer, but we can open chests and such, so we were able to scrape some together. This got us the reconnaissance report, but the next closest note was Alistair's diary, which is in a house in the Mouldering Fields. Just getting past the grobbles between us and Burwitch was a nightmare, as they could take us down with a couple shots. And we also got very lost once we made it to the Mouldering Fields. In fact, we got so lost we ended up in the Burwitch waterfront somehow and found the Harbour Master's log before we found Alistair's diary and had to go back for it. Needless to say, pretty much any enemy here can take us down in a couple hits, and without the evade skill, which lets us dash through enemies, I don't know what we would have done. Pretty much every note after this is a blur, but not because it was easy. It's a blur of getting lost and cornered and desperately trying to lead spiders to the ethereal so they'd kill each other for a bit, and dying. Over and over and over. If it weren't for the rift gates, the permanent ones around the map and our personal one we can put anywhere, I don't think we'd have been able to get anywhere. We get the rest of Inquisitor Creed's journal, all of Gethrin's notes, and Zanbrand's notes, but we have to double back for Warden Krieg's journal and the missive to the Whitemire Bloodbound. As for which masteries we want, while I show you some footage of the death montage, I'm going to break them down one at a time. This may take a bit. Soldier offers more than I thought it would. Many of its passives would make us tankier, and Field Command would boost the offensive and defensive ability, armor, damage, and attack and casting speed of ourselves and, more importantly, nearby allies, including our pets. However, the mastery offers no pets itself. Demolitionist has Flame Touched, an aura with fire and physical damage, and that boosts fire, lightning, burn, electrocute, physical, internal trauma, pierce, and retaliation damage, as well as offensive and defensive ability. It would work well with the occultist's Raven and Hellhound, who deal lightning and fire damage innately. However, it has no pets of its own or useful passives. Speaking of occultist, I knew from the start it would likely be one of our masteries. Frankly, it is my favorite one. It has 2 pets, a raven with lightning and healing spells, as well as an aura that gives all our pets elemental damage and lightning retaliation, and a hellhound with fire and physical attacks and an aura that boosts fire and chaos damage and grants fire retaliation. Soleil's Witchfire can be transmuted into giving our pets chaos damage, and Bond's Abysmial boosts our pets' health, energy, damage, and speed, at least with the manipulation upgrade. Unfortunately, Blood of Dreeg is an active skill, not an aura, and it deals acid damage if it hits nearby enemies, so we can't use it. Nightblade barely has anything for us. Phantasmal armor would make us tankier, but soldiers' passives are better in that regard. And there's blade spirits, but they're at the end of the skill tree, and frankly, I don't know if I'd consider them pets as they scale off player damage bonuses, not pet ones. Arcanist is arguably even worse for us than Nightblade. Iskandra's Elemental Exchange can be transmuted into giving our pets elemental damage, but that's literally it as far as I can tell. Shaman is a solid contender, but sadly its totems suffer from the same "is this really a pet?" conundrum Nightblade's blade spirits did. If you count Wendigo totems as pets, they'd siphon life from foes to heal us, but it scales off player bonuses instead of pet bonuses, so to me it feels more like an attack, like the Sigil of Consumption, for example, than a pet. Storm totems and Wind Devils are in the same boat. Look, I know they're summons on some level, but they just don't feel like pets to me, especially since they don't use the various pet modifiers. This sadly eliminates the top 2/3 of the skill tree, but we still have the Briarthorn, a strong physical attacker with an aura that boosts our other pets' retaliation, damage, physical and bleeding resistances, and offensive ability. The Primal Spirit, a timed but powerful pet, Mogdrogen's Mogdrogen. Okay, we're going with Mogdrogen. It's one of those words that I've only ever read and never tried to pronounce. Mogdrogen's Pact, an aura we can use to boost our pet's physical damage, health and energy regen, health, reduce the duration of bleed and poison, defensive ability, armor, pierce, and aether resistance, and retaliation damage. And finally, Primal Bond, which increases our damage absorption and reduces the damage we take from beasts while boosting our pet's damage. There are a few other effects relating to our damage, but they don't matter for this run. Inquisitor and Oathkeeper have nothing for us. The runes and the Guardian of Empyrean all scale with player bonuses, so despite technically being summons, they're not valid for this run. As you'd probably expect, Necromancer has a ton of potential stuff for us to use. First and foremost, we could summon a horde of skeletons. There's also a Blight Fiend, Call of the Grave, which boosts our pet's damage for a short time, and Master of Death, an aura that boosts our defensive ability and both our own and our pet's offensive ability and vitality resistance. But more importantly, also increases our pet's overall damage and further boosts their acid, vitality, and poison damage, and converts some of their physical damage to vitality damage. Sadly, Reap Spirit requires us to slay an enemy with its initial damage in order to summon a Wraith, so even though the Wraiths scale off pet bonuses, we'd never be able to summon them. Putting all of that together, we know we want Occultist or Necromancer to be our first mastery, as they're the only ones with a pet early in the skill tree. While we could take both, Shaman makes a strong case to be the second mastery even without its Wind Devils and Totems. While Soldier and Demolitionist's auras are tempting, Shaman, Occultist, and Necromancer all have comparable auras for our pets as well as more pets. While it's close, I'm currently thinking we'll go with Necromancer and then Occultist. While Shaman is tempting and would likely pair well with either of those, I feel we need Necromancer because it offers the most pets as far as sheer numbers are concerned, and a lot of Shaman's auras increase retaliation damage by a percentage, but our pets won't have much retaliation damage to increase without the Occultist pet's auras. Necromancer and Occultist also have skills that convert a significant portion of our pet's physical damage to chaos or vitality damage, while Shaman has lots of percentage boosts to physical damage. And the order those happen in matters. Does the physical damage get increased and then converted? Or does part of it get converted and then only the remainder gets increased? Well, according to the Crate Entertainment Forum, it's the latter, so Shaman's boost to physical damage would be less effective after nearly half our pet's physical damage was converted to vitality or chaos. Shaman's other big draw is that it massively boosts our pet's health regeneration, total health, defensive ability, and armor. Basically that it makes them tankier than Occultist or Necromancer will. Don't get me wrong, tankiness is useful, but resummoning isn't much of a problem because we'll barely be using any other skills, so we should have plenty of energy available. This might be a good time to make it very clear that I am not an expert at this game and that it's very possible I'm missing something. But it seems like the best combinations would be Occultist Shaman, so our Raven and Hellhound would provide retaliation damage for our Briarthorn and Mogdrogen's Pact to increase, or Occultist Necromancer, so our Raven and Hellhound's auras could apply to a horde of skeletons. It's also worth noting the skeletons have an upgrade that increases their elemental damage, and the Raven's aura would give them more elemental damage on top of that. It turns out the notes we got in the lower crossing plus Hargate's first journal entry were enough to get us to level 3, so we didn't have to run all around Act 1 finding notes, and what took several hours could have taken half an hour. I'll do my best to remember that for future runs that require us to level up without combat. Anyway, we're going with Necromancer Occultist, in that order because I'd like to get a skeleton horde going ASAP, and if we went with Occultist first, we'd only have a Raven. It takes a while to get to the Hellhound. As such, we'll dump all 7 levels worth of skill points into the skeleton skill, which boosts their overall stats and increases the odds of summoning more powerful skeletons in each batch of 3 we summon. The next thing we'll go for is the first upgrade for the Skellies, Undead Legion, so we can summon more of them at once. It also reduces the cooldown and energy cost of the summoning skill, so if enemies take out our Skellies, we can throw more into the fray faster. Now that we have pets, we have no trouble clearing Act 1. The only opponent that gives us pause is an optional boss called Gutworm the Man-Eater. Despite having leveled enough to get the Occultist Mastery and the Raven and Hellhound to go with it, our Horde can't outdamage Gutworm's healing, and he's destroying them slightly faster than we can replace them. We had to leave and come back a few levels later once our Raven had the first few levels of its Mend spell in Storm Aura. On that note, while Necromancer was our first mastery, Occultist will be our focus for some time. Don't get me wrong, there are many things Necromancer can still offer us, but I want to get our Raven and Hellhound's respective auras maxed out because they'll give all our pets elemental damage and elemental retaliation, meaning they'll deal more damage with their attacks and they'll deal damage whenever they're hit. We'll have to dump a lot of skill points into the Occultist Mastery to unlock the Hellhound's Hellfire aura, so we'll likely pick up Bonds of Bismiel as well before we switch back to investigate Necromancer. After some light cackling as Wardenkrieg is torn to pieces in seconds, we return to Devil's Crossing and find out there's a bandit problem brewing in the farmlands near the prison. Not only do we need to nip that problem in the bud, we also need to clear the farmlands so the survivors can get agriculture going again. So that's where we're going next. Before we leave, however, we've accumulated 7 devotion points over the course of clearing Act 1, and we should probably figure out what we're doing with them. Overanalyzing incoming. Chapters exist if you want to skip it, although, frankly, with how this is going, let's face it, talking about the build is probably what makes up the overwhelming bulk of this run. That being said, I'm not going to go over all the constellations because, well, look at this menu. I love stuff like this, but talking about all of them would take way too long, so I'll only cover the ones we're considering. Thankfully, we can type pet into the search bars and all stars that relate to pets in some way are highlighted. However, we can't jump to any star we want. In addition to each constellation having a set starting point that forces us to take its stars in a certain order, we need certain affinities to unlock constellations in the first place. We'll get a bit of affinity from picking stars in the Crossroads constellation, the only one that's currently unlocked, but most affinities are obtained by completing other constellations. We need to pick constellations with pet bonuses that we also ideally want to complete, meaning ones that don't have too many useless stars. And we need to keep the affinities needed to unlock constellations we want and the affinities the constellations reward us with in mind. I considered the Shepherd's Crook, but a lot of its power is tied to the Shepherd's Call skill. Now, I once again remind you, I am not a Grim Dawn expert, but as I understand it, Shepherd's Call would have to be attached to one of our other skills, and it would have a 25% chance to trigger whenever we used the skill it was attached to. The problem is we aren't using many skills, and the ones we are using aren't the kind you spam. They're summons and toggleable auras. Even if they can trigger it, I couldn't find a clear answer on that, we don't use them often. The Howl of Mugdrogen is in the same boat, but the Mugdrogen the Wolf constellation has enough other bonuses to be worthwhile if we ever get the affinities. Currently we're looking at the Fiend and Jackal, which have bonuses of their own and give a mix of Eldritch and Chaos affinity that open the Raven, Manticore, and Bismiel's Bonds constellations. There are constellations of the Primordial and Order affinities that would also be great, but they seem more focused on physical damage and health regeneration, which I suspect would be better if we'd picked Shaman as one of our masteries. Whereas the constellations in the Chaos and Eldritch directions have a lot of acid, fire, and elemental damage bonuses that will benefit us. We may still take the Stag constellation simply because it only requires one order to open, and it has a lot of all damage bonuses to pets in addition to physical damage bonuses, but I don't know for sure. Act 2 is going smoothly so far, with only a couple deaths when a bunch of enemies targeted us before our pets charged in. Our gear is likely part of the issue. The only notable pieces are the Acolyte's Cord and Marrow Band, which are improving our skeletons, and our Sword and Metal, which are improving our Raven and Hellhound in addition to the bonuses that apply to all pets. Since we're focused exclusively on pet bonuses, a lot of our equipment is only level 18 to 26, and we're level 35, so it's safe to say it's underleveled. Even if the pet bonuses are still good, they aren't giving us enough armor, health, or resistances to survive many hits. Adding components to our gear will improve our defenses, and some add even more pet bonuses. I was torn between Hellsbane ammo and Enchanted Flint for our caster offhand, as the lightning bonuses from the Flint would aid our Raven and slightly benefit our other pets as they get some lightning damage from our Raven's aura, but the ammo improves the fire damage from our Hellhound's aura and attacks, and some of our skeleton spells. I settled on both, the Flint on our sword and the ammo on our offhand. I was considering a Riftstone for chaos damage instead, as our Hellhound's aura also improves that, but our pets use lightning, fire, and vitality more than chaos. We put Bindings of Bismiel on our chest armor, which gives our pets more health and damage. Our other armor and accessories get components that improve our health and defenses. Corpse Dust, Frozen Hearts, Ancient Plates, a Mark of the Traveler, a Wardstone, Bristly Fur, and an Unholy Inscription. I also noticed our sword gives us a skill for an extra timed summon, Salazar's Harbinger, so we'll be using that. We're now level 53 and standing outside Fort Aiken, which puts us at the beginning of Act 4. Sorry about skipping Act 3. I intended to keep going until we hit a snag and then realized we'd completed an entire act. I didn't think pets would be so cromulent. Our only contribution in combat is using Call of the Grave to yell at them to hit harder. Granted, the last time I played a pet build without mods was before the DLC that added necromancers, so the best option at that time, as far as I know, was a cultist shaman, which only has 3 pets if you don't include totems. Anyway, here are the changes to our skills since I last showed you. On the Necromancer side, we've gotten the Mastery up to 25 and maxed out the Will of the Crypt upgrade to our skeletons, giving them vitality damage, vitality resistance, and armor, in addition to raising any elemental damage they happen to have, such as the lightning and fire damage from our Raven and Hellhound's auras, or the auras from our gear. We've also unlocked our Blight Fiend and its first upgrade, Rotting Fumes, which causes it to deal poison damage to enemies in melee range, but we haven't put further points into it. They're above 1 only due to bonuses from gear. In fact, the only reason we've raised Necromancer to 25 is the Call of the Grave skill. While it boosts several damage types that would be relevant if we lifted a finger in combat, it doesn't deal direct damage, so it's allowed. What we want is the huge damage boost it gives our pets for a few seconds. There's one last thing Necromancer could give us beyond dumping points into the Blight Fiend: the Master of Death, which grants our pets vitality and chaos resistance and yet another damage boost. However, it requires 25 more points in the mastery before we can invest in it, so it's on hold. Instead, we're working towards the manipulation upgrade to the Bonds of Bismiel on the Occultist Mastery. To be fair, it accomplishes roughly the same thing as Master of Death, but we were further in the Occultist Mastery already for our Hellhound's aura, and our gear would give us +8 to manipulation, but only after we get a point in it. Our devotions are ticking along too. We've invested in the Fiend, Jackal, Raven, Bismiel's Bonds, and Manticore constellations, and are working on the Night Talon. These give our pets massive overall damage bonuses, as well as more focused bonuses to lightning, fire, chaos, acid, and poison. They also provide small buffs to their speed, health, and vitality resistance, as well as a smattering of bonuses to our health and resistances. If we get enough devotion points to complete the Night Talon, we'll go for either the Toad or Stag next. But I'm not sure how many more devotion points are available on veteran difficulty. As for our gear, some of it has improved. We got a solid helmet drop in, I believe, the Arcovian Undercity, and even though it's only level 36, it has great pet bonuses, as well as bonuses to the Blight Fiend, raised skeletons, and manipulation skills. We also finally replaced our yellow ring with a green one that gives our pets a damage boost and raises the Bond's Abysmal skill, but it and the Marrow Band are both sorely underleveled at this point. In fact, this could be said of our chest and leg armor, amulet, and boots, and we're somehow still using the shoulder armor we got around level 7. We found a belt, medal, and gauntlets more recently, so they're better, but still not notable. The only useful blue drop we've gotten in recent memory is the Dreadguard shield, which boosts several skills and gives our pets a nearly 50% overall damage bonus, even though it's only level 40. We've crafted a relic though, Death Chill. The bonuses it gives us are mostly pointless, although we get some health and cold and vitality resistance. But it also gives us a Death Chill aura that gives nearby allies vitality, cold, and frostburn damage. Admittedly, the Ancestor Relic would likely be better, and I'll cover it in detail if we find what we need to craft one, but at least we have a useful relic. I spent quite a long time after this point trying to decide what I should even bother to cover, because we were just tearing everything apart. We haven't died in ages. We've only died a couple of times since after the beginning part where I was running around trying to get nodes. And I eventually decided it was best to just wrap this up and move on to harder runs. So the final areas of the base game don't give us any issues. We even got through the Steps of Torment and Entropy, and while we had to resummon our pets more than usual while in those areas, we were able to handle them just fine. The last few areas of the base game get more mazy than I'd like, but we don't actually run into any real threats. Even the final boss of the base game, the Voice of Cthon, barely makes us blink. I'll pick a harder challenge next time, I promise. We unlocked Elite and Ultimate difficulty and the Ashes of Mormouth DLC, but frankly, I don't think things would change enough to be worth continuing. If you disagree and want to see this character on Ultimate, let me know in the comments. If enough of you do, I'll do a part 2 for this challenge at some point. I feel bad those of you who were excited to see Grim Dawn on the channel got such an easy run. It'd been a while since I played Grim Dawn, so I wanted a simpler run to start off with and kind of overshot. To make it up to you, I'm going to start working on a Grim Dawn with no Masteries run, but it'll take a while. I'm also working on a Dragon Age Origins run. It'll probably come out next, but I don't want to spoil it. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and if you haven't been seeing videos from channels you're subscribed to lately, check to see if your account has been set to restricted mode. I've heard that YouTube's been doing that lately. I don't know for sure. I can say that it hasn't happened to me and Bill, but I don't know. If they're using an AI to try to determine how old everyone is, they probably look at the long list of searches about chronic back pain and assume that we're frickin' ancient. So, we're good, but you might not be, so just check. See y'all next time.